Welcome to this new lesson in the Photoshop section. This lesson is a full demonstration of how I would edit a photo using all of the skills and techniques we've learned so far. Again, this is with the camera raw option within Photoshop CC. We are going to be including lessons coming up shortly about how you can edit photos directly within Photoshop, not using camera raw. But by now, I think you've learned a lot and it's time to put your skills to practice. So I'm going to edit this Photoshop 4 practice file if you want to follow along. I haven't edited this photo, so this is sort of a real world demonstration. You're going to follow my entire process, and so it might be a little bit longer. Feel free to skip this if this is not something you're interested in. So the first thing that I do with all my photos is generally I crop it. This photo is a little bit hard because it's very dark, so what I'm going to quickly do is boost the exposure. Now this isn't going to be my final exposure adjustment, it's just for me to see the photo better, so when I go to my crop tool, I can edit it better. If I want to edit this photo for, say I want this to be my computer backdrop, my desktop background, I would need a crop of 16 by 9. So I'm going to choose that aspect ratio and then just click and drag out to get an initial first sort of size. So now I'm going to make it as wide as the photo and drag up or down. I kind of like dragging down because actually I kind of like seeing that church in the distance. So I need a balance of wanting to see some of these houses up front. The main part of this image is sort of this river going through, and either I need to decide to just cut off that sort of chapel in the background completely or have it completely, because I don't, maybe something like that might be good. Sometimes it's a little hard for me to see with the overlay, so I'll just press return on my keyboard. And if you see this photo for the first time, you might not think anything of it, but I think I need to move it up or down. So let's go back to the crop, move down, press return. That's not terrible, but let's try up. It's getting more of the background in the distance. I think I like that better. There's more layering to this photo. Cool. So now the next things I would do would be starting with my basic adjustments for white balance and exposure. White balance looks good. The only thing that I would do differently is if I want to give sort of a warmer tint or a cooler tint to it, I would adjust it, maybe making it a little bit warmer. Okay. This is, for everyone that doesn't know, the Los Angeles River, folks. It's currently one of the, I would say, ugliest rivers in the world. Hopefully they do something about it. I know there's lots of groups that are trying to revitalize the areas around the LA River, which I would love to see. But yes, this is the great Los Angeles River sitting right next to all of these industrial buildings. It's definitely that sort of gritty Los Angeles vibe if you've ever been here. All right, so next I would play with my exposure. So I want to actually drop my overall exposure to get it to sort of starting from scratch. Usually I don't do much with the overall exposure, except with this photo, I need to make everything brighter, I think. But before I go too far with that slider, I am going to pick up things like the highlights and then the shadows, bring up the shadows. Wow, the shadows doesn't do much, so it's a lot of the blacks down here. Now I don't want to do that, so what I actually am going to do is bring up the exposure quite a bit. So now it's a little bit brighter than we had before, but make it a little bit more contrasty by bringing down the blacks. See how that looks pretty good? At least I think it looks pretty good. And then with the whites, maybe bring down the whites just to get a little bit more information back in some of the highlights of those buildings. Next, I'll look at these 3 adjustments down here. Since this is more of a landscape, it's very wide. There's lots of detail to it. I do want to increase the clarity just a bit. Going too far, not my style. Definitely not going to the left, but going to the right, just like plus 10 or so, helps a little bit. You can always see the before and after by clicking this button down here, the one that looks like the Y, or pressing Q on your keyboard to shuffle through these sort of before and after settings. With saturation and vibrance, I might just boost the saturation a little bit to give this image a little bit more color. Sometimes boosting things too much might sort of make it look unnatural, but since it's a landscape, I like to boost a little bit. I'm also going to boost colors individually using HSL in just a minute. So I'm pretty happy with these sort of basic adjustments. I am going to skip tone curve for now. I usually like to leave the tone curve for the very end when I just add a little bit more contrast if I want. With noise reduction, let me zoom in here really quick. We were using a ISO that's really low, so you don't get too much noise. But zoomed in here, there's a little bit of noise, but it's also that balance of, do I actually want to sharpen things? I mean, everything's pretty much in focus. I also add a little bit of clarity. Let's zoom out and see what adding some sharpness does. Actually, adding some sharpening, to me anyways, I know it's very subtle and hard for you to see if you're watching just the video, it does pretty good. So I'm going to boost this to like 50 or so. And noise reduction, I'm just going to leave it because I can live with that little bit of noise that was added. All right, so now let's get to HSL. What I want to do is see if I can play with the colors of these trees that do line the river. So what I will do is use my pinpoint adjustment tool, the targeted adjustment tool, for saturation by clicking in the image to increase the saturation or decrease the saturation of these trees. And so when I do that, if I go too far, it looks unnatural because it brings some of the saturation of the buildings up. But what we can do later on is use some of our adjustment brushes or our graduated or radial filter to decrease the saturation up there, which I'm going to do. So I kind of have to live with that unknowing, seeing that, oh, I don't like the saturation up there now, but later on I might. I also want to get as much green as possible, so I'm going to bring up the greens as much as possible. Well, not as much as possible, but pretty far up. So right now it's starting to look a little unnatural to me, and I don't really like it, but we're going to fix that in a second. In terms of luminance and hue, I'm not really going to change anything unless I want to change these trees to be green. Nah, I'm not going to fake anyone out. I'm going to leave it as is. All right, so that is the HSL. Split toning I'm not going to do. Lens corrections, I will see what happens, but pretty much nothing because it's not reading the lens. I think I was using, or this was Sam's camera, and he was probably using a Nikon lens with an adapter. I don't remember exactly what lens, so I'm not even going to worry about lens corrections because it looks fine to me. In terms of effects, I also add a vignette usually at the end. Right now, I don't think I'm going to include any sort of vignette, so I'm going to skip that. We're also going to skip these last options there. So let's go ahead and make our local adjustments. So I'm trying to decide for the top and the bottom, or where the buildings are, should I use a graduated radial or adjustment brush? I honestly think the adjustment brush might be the easiest for this. So I've got my mask turned on, it's pink. This will make it easier to see everything. All my settings are reset. Let's actually turn our flow all the way up though. So now I'm just gonna paint up here, paint all these buildings, because I want the river really to be the main focus. So I'm painting down here. I am painting over some of the trees, but that's okay because I can erase them just by pressing the Option key, which takes me to the erase. And now I'm just going to erase over these trees that were selected. I want the river to sort of pop as much as possible. Might go into the erase and decrease the size just a little bit, get some of these. I don't want it just to be like a dramatic line, so I just kind of go in here, make sure it's a little more organic along the edge. And then let's make it really small. And go over here, just following the river all the way up there. What I might do, I'm going to leave it at that for now. I'll show you what I'm going to do in a second if I want. So I'm going to turn off my mask so I don't necessarily see any changes until I make adjustments here, which I'm going to drop my saturation just a little bit. And if I drop completely, you can see that everything starts to decrease in saturation and the river really starts to pop. So let's do the before and after with Q on our keyboard. Here you can really see before and after how much that river pops than before. I might also just see what the exposure does. Making it dropping it just a little bit might make that river pop out. Even increasing the exposure might. It might be better to do that with the shadows or highlights, which I find actually looks more natural often than just adjusting the overall exposure. I almost liked it when it was dark like that. It really does kind of pop that way. When I increase the exposure, it starts to look a little wonky. Let's bring down the shadows. Let's bring down the blacks. I don't want to look too unnatural, but I actually think I like it when the overall exposure was just brought back down just a little bit. If you want to get like super creative with this is how you could create some sort of interesting sort of depth of field perspective. So if I drop down my sharpness, see how that creates sort of that tilt shift look? I'm not going to do that for this photo, but that's how you could apply sort of a tilt shift look to a photo using either any of these local adjustments. My question is, do I want this full sort of field over here to have the same edits as the river here, or do I want to also include this within this adjustment brush? Let me just test it out by taking my add brush and just painting over here really quick to see what would happen if it kind of looks like that. Let me undo. Let's make it a little smaller so I can get a little bit more precise. Something like that. I don't know. You tell me. Pressing undo, Control Z on a Mac, Command Z, or Command Z on a Mac, Control Z on a PC. You kind of go back and forth. I think I like it on there. Maybe if I decrease the flow just to drop the exposure just a little bit. Actually, not the flow and the density, just to drop a little bit so it's not competing as much. That kind of works pretty good. Okay, so now let's look at our mask. See how it's a little bit lighter here on the right-hand side? I think that looks pretty good. Cool, so I'm happy with those local adjustments. I didn't show you this before, but this is how you can quickly rotate an image if you're interested in that. Let me just think if I want to add any sort of contrast. It's pretty contrasty already, so I'll just play with this curve, but I don't think so. It's crazy contrasty right now, so I'm gonna undo that. I'm actually pretty happy with this image compared to the before and after. I think it looks way better. The colors are a lot better. Maybe going through my overall sort of exposure, bringing up the black point just a little bit is a little bit better. I feel like it was almost too contrasty in these buildings down below. Hey, but I'm happy with that. So this is my process of editing. I'm going to go ahead and save it just to show you the entire process. So clicking save, I'm going to save this in my Photoshop edits folder that I created before. I'll just save it as Photoshop practice number 1. JPEG. I don't need to remove location information. Quality all the way to 10. No limits. Resize to fit. Nope, gonna turn that off. Resolution 150. Sharpening. Nope. Click save. Now let's go to our folder. Should be in here. And there you have it. Here is our practice number 1. Hey, this looks pretty good to me. I'm happy with it. It definitely pops a lot more than the original image, which let's look at. There you have it. The original image, before and after. I'm happy with it. Thank you so much for watching this full demonstration. I'm going to do another one with a portrait edit, and then we're going to jump into Photoshop to show you how you can edit photos right within Photoshop itself, not using Camera Raw.